4 of our committee members on, so we've got a quorum, which is great. We can move forward.
No, the chairperson, excuse me, good afternoon. Chairperson called the meeting to order. It's 6 o'clock.
Oh, you're
This
the
is the
one who does
finance
it?
committee meeting. First
Okay.
thing that should be on the agenda, call the meeting to order. And at this time, we will select a chairperson for that committee. A recommendation has been that we select Mr. Janelli as chairperson. And then once you guys select that, then you can move on with your agenda.
Okay. Sorry about that, Gladys. I did not see you on here.
Seconded the recommendation of Mr. Janelli for chair.
Okay, I guess any other recommendations? None? Okay, I guess, does everybody have to vote?
You win, Richard.
All right, thank you. Add that to my stipend, which I appreciate.
Nice touch.
Kate, excuse me, Kate, could you just take the minutes because we need to know that it was a consensus of the group, please?
Yep, no problem.
Okay, and the finance committee. Do we have everybody attending? It's myself, Juanita, Kate, Richard. Is somebody missing?
Teresa.
Okay.
She's on.
Oh, is she?
I'm
here.
Hi, Teresa. Yep, I didn't see your name, so it's tough. All right. Well, I thank you for giving me the honor to lead this group. I hopefully that we can make this, productive, and basically that's it. I did want to start off by, I don't see John Spang on here.
We're all here, Mr. J. He's here.
Oh, is he?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I wanted to thank John for his quick and detailed response to my email to him that I did back in it was December 30th, and I asked John to send you copies of that response again today. John had mentioned that last week he had given you hard copies. The purpose of my doing that was basically to bring us up to date. We're comprised of a board that some of us are coming in midstream and don't have the knowledge or the history, or even experience in some cases, as to what happened in the past. So there were certain questions that, from what I perceived to read in the paper and other things, that sounded confusing to me, that I wrote to John for clarity purposes and thanked him for his response, which I thought was very detailed and good, so that it brings everybody up to date, and at least we operate from being on the same page. So it's not as if I wrote him a note and he gave me the information and now I had all this great information and nobody else has it. So I'd like to be able to share things that at least I learn or gather with my colleagues, whether in a finance committee or on a full board. To me, I think some of the answers, the questions in here are important, and the answers are equally as important. And I wanted to find out from you whether you think it would be worthwhile to go through some of these questions where I've earmarked that I had additional questions. Do you think that would be informative?
Rich?
Yeah.
I'm new to the board, but I do not know who Michael Weaver is, and I do not know who Kenneth Wallace is in their roles.
Okay, I can't see. Michael Weaver, I believe, is John Spang's assistant. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And Mr. Spang is the director of finance.
I know
Uh,
him.
yeah.
Ken Wallace is our technical support. He'll help us with the Zoom part of the meeting if we need assistance, sharing any screens, that kind of thing. He's there to help.
Juanita, Ken is also the same person who streams our meetings, our Board of Ed meetings.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
So if you feel that there's no need to go through any of this further and pretty much you comprehend the answers, then I won't waste your time. But I'll ask you what your opinion is. Well, let me start off by saying this. You could read it at your leisure. One of the questions I asked John was for basically a budget for the academy, which he provided me in great detail. And when I was looking at that budget and the compilation of the numbers, it came to a total basically of some $13 million supposedly to open the academy for grades 6 through 12. Okay. And when I calculated, I went through and I took down the costs for each grade level. That is 9 through 12 and 6 through 8. And the only assumption I had to make I allocated the benefits based on a percentage to the total. And I think I took 70% of the startup costs for the materials and the other stuff, but it was a small number. Essentially, my point was when it came out for the 9 through 12 cost, it was like $4,600,000 or an average cost of $4,200 a student. And that's for 1,100 students, if I'm not mistaken. And then there was for grades 6 through 8, it was like $5,255,000. $5,255,000, or an average cost of about $17,500 for some 300 students. So when I looked at that and I says, wow, it seems like that is really disproportionate when you're having almost $18,000 a student to educate for 300 students. That's, to me, just an observation and a statement. The other thing, which I think is more important, is when I look at the budget of the $13 million, and I'm assuming that with this year, we have close to maybe a $1.5 million or $2 million in the budget, and maybe 500,000 or 600,000 from last year. But let's say to make the numbers nice and round even, in the past 2 years, we're looking to absorb $3 million of the $13 million. Has there been any conversation where we're going, and the school is scheduled to be open shortly? Has there been conversation about the additional $10 million, which is going to be a bump into one of our financial budgets that we're making in the near future? And I ask that because that is a huge number. And if we don't have, I think this is something where we need some sort of an assurance that when this request comes from us on a budget that's necessary to open the district for that much money, that we be at least aware or assured that it's going to be there, because on the 11th hour, I don't know what Mr. Walton's going to do if he doesn't have that money. And then he has to go to Plan B or C or D, is to figure out how to implement, maybe by grade level or over the course of time, this particular academy. So again, not being part of this board previously, has there been conversations on that? We talk about this year the $10 million cliff relative to the ESSER money. To me, this is another cliff that's coming up, and I just find it uncomfortable to go ahead without any knowledge of or assurance that this has been talked about and that we're going to be guaranteed the funding. And I go back and give you some experience that I had. Years ago, there was an addition put on a high school for some 55 or $60 million. Mark Boughton at the time said that he would pretty much guarantee that he would pass this. I think it was bonded. He would pass the bonding. But he came to a board meeting with that statement and said, I can also tell you I cannot afford to staff that new addition. So we knew that we were going in having an additional capacity, and then we had to figure out how we were going to fund it. Same thing happened years earlier when we opened the West Side Academy. We had to do it in stages because of lack of funding. So again, my question comes from some previous experience and knowing that it's difficulty. So can anybody shed some light on that?
Rich, could I take a stab at some of that first? And I don't have all the answers, but a couple things. You know, one of the things about the standalone budget that we have for the academies, and the reason the cost is so much lower on what we're presenting for the 9-12 compared to the 6-8 middle school, is the large number of staff from the high school that will be transferring over, so to speak. What you see in the budget is the incremental staff that we'll have to add in that year. And that drives that number down. There isn't as much of a middle school staff that will be transferring from other schools. Most of that will be new. Now, the last conversation we had with them, and it wasn't much of a conversation, it was kind of one way, was when we brought our budget last April to the then ad hoc committee. And one of the members brought up exactly that point, and he felt that our conversations should be further along than they were at that point. Now, certainly we have to play a major role in securing funding, but really that is the province of the city council, whether they do it through property taxes or through the existing surplus, you know, their fund balance, or by reducing other departments. You know, their job is to raise the funds, and you know, we're presenting what we think is the need. However, a couple of things. It's not as if it's been ignored either. There have been a number of occasions where we've interacted with the mayor's office. They know what our plans are. We've worked very closely on the construction. Of course, it's no surprise there. But maybe I would also look to the superintendent. A little more than a year ago, I think Kevin started having some community meetings to get support and to get people interested and aware, and the interest was not strong. We thought we were on the path, and I don't know, the reciprocity wasn't there. Is that a way to put it, Kevin, do you think? Or
I think that's fair. Mr. Janelli, can I share the if it's okay with you, I'd like to share the presentation I think that John shared with you. And I think some of our sitting board, previous board members will recognize the presentation. This was shared by John and Kara at a board meeting. Please cover your eyes for a second while I run through this quickly to get to the beginning. So this was in November of 2022. That was the same time there was a committee of the council, the Education Committee, where the same question was asked by that committee. And that was, what is going to be the cost to open up the academy in 9-12, but also what would be the cost to open up 6-8. And so we had around about 5 or 6 meetings starting in September of 2022. I believe we ended in January sharing some big numbers. We shared everything, and I think monthly what we did was we reviewed the physical plans of the building. We spent another meeting talking about the themes of the academies. And then, we began to talk about what it was going to cost for transportation. And we tried to break down all of the respective costs before we got to the slides that you were about to see. So these numbers are represented in our 24-25 projected costs, but which will move based on how much we get from the city now. So these numbers were flat. I did not think at the time when we put this presentation together, we made any we had any expectations about enrollment growth. We just talked about the staffing that exists right now. And so these numbers that you see, and this is for current Danbury High School. This is how many teachers are there. This is how many teachers in Danbury Career Academy, the other campus. I'm sorry, yes, the other campus. And so this is how many regular teachers would be needed across the system. And it would be 7 new hires we would need for regular classroom teachers. And then for remedial, meaning special, for remedial PPT, I'm sorry, recommended by PPT, there will be 1, and you'll kind of see 33 currently at the high school. We would need 8 for, and John, if I'm not mistaken, this one is for the middle school and this one is for the high school. This is the total that's needed, and then it's 3 new hires. And then ESL is the same, and so this is currently at the high school. We would need 4 at the middle school. I'm sorry, yeah, 4 at this is what it is, I'm sorry. So it's 2 academies over at the West Campus, 4 academies at the high school, 14 total, 3 new hires needed. Counselors,
Yeah, but
5
Kevin,
counselors needed at the campus on the West Campus, 12 counselors needed at the high school, 17 in total, 5 new hires needed. And so going from left to right, that's how this reads. And so Danbury Career Academy on the west, Danbury Career Academy, Danbury High School, and then this is the total: 64 needed on the campus with 2 academies, 144 regular ed teachers needed at the campus with 4 academies.
yeah, and Kevin, pardon me.
Yes.
I don't want you to waste your time, but in the details, in the memo that John answered to me, he summarized it. It was very clear. My point is, and it is as follows: give or take $1 million. When this academy opens up, you're going to be asking for a round number of $10 million more, over and above what we refer to as the operational budget.
That is correct.
Okay.
This
All I'm
ASCO,
saying, all I'm saying as a board member, or if I were the superintendent, all right, at this particular point, I think we ought to shake the trees and make sure that whatever target date you have that you're going to go into this school, that's going to coincide with the construction. And I think it was a blessing that the construction was put back a year, because I'm not sure we could have afforded to go in this time, but it's something else. But that extra $10 million that we're asking for, over and above whatever your budget comes to, is going to be critical. And if it's not there, then you're going to have to start figuring out what you're going to do. I mean, that's an exercise for a later date, but I think, and again, it goes into the multi-year projections, but I tend to think conversations like this have to be started so that you as the superintendent and us as a board don't become blindsided. You know, we
Right.
don't want to
So,
deal
Mr.
with this.
Janelli, to be clear, we've had a number of conversations about this. This November presentation is actually a board meeting in November of 2022. We had several meetings with the Education Committee of the council and certainly had a number of conversations with the previous mayor administration and have already had a conversation sharing round numbers with the current administration. And, you know, we have no problem continuing to advance this dialogue because it needs to happen. I can't say that we're going to get some absolutes on terms of how it's going to be supported because I'm concerned about 24, 25. But I'm hearing you loud and clear that folks need to
Okay,
understand
that's
similar to this year, another investment is going to be needed in the 25, 26 school year as well.
no, I understand, Kevin. I'm just looking out
Richard,
for.
Richard, if I may interject, if you don't mind, please. So they've had preliminary discussions regarding the 25-26 budget when we bring the academies on. I think for tonight's purposes, we need to look at 23-24 budget, where we're going to stand as far as year end is concerned come June, and whether or not, you know, we're going to get that umbrella of $4 million. And then where are we in regard to the operating budget for 24-25? I love the fact that you look long term and you want to make sure that that basically that the city is aware of the dollars and cents that's going to be involved. But I almost think we're putting a horse in front of the cart. That
Yeah, I agree, Richard.
here,
All I said,
let's look at 24-25 budget.
yeah,
And then
all I,
again, 25,
Can I-
26 will come here soon enough.
Excuse me. Mr. Janelli, you're chair. Could we let one person answer the
Yeah.
question, then move
Right.
on? Teresa had her hand up for a while. Richard is talking, and let Richard finish his question and then the answer, and then we go over to Teresa. So
Sure.
everyone, whether they are board members or listening, can get at least some clarification and hear what the other person is saying.
yeah.
So could
So-
Richard continue with his question, Harley, and then we'll move on to Teresa.
So,
Again, I just feel that we're putting the horse in front of the cart discussing 25-26.
Yeah.
That preliminary discussions have already been made with the city that on top of the operating budget and the wish list for 24-25, that we're going to need a minimum of $10 million to open up the academy. I would rather for this meeting for tonight, let's look at where we stand 23-24, where we feel we're going to finish in 24, and then look at the 24-25 budget, because from what I've seen from Mr. Walston, that, you know, he has added wish list. He has added, you know, positions and support staff in terms of a wish list, taking it even above the 168 originally proposed.
okay, Teresa? I'm
thank-
sorry, I can't see your hands, so somebody who can,
Yeah, I understand. I just want to point out as the past 2-year member of the Finance Committee, we were originally told that we were just going to open up the 2 academies on the west side and not take care of the junior high. And not until this year's proposal for next year's budget that we learned that everything was going to open up at once. And the move-in, the whole schmatzer. I just want to point out, we were originally told the only 2 sections of the academy were going to open at the west side.
okay.
That's my take.
Great. So, Richard, I wasn't looking to get involved in details on this. All I was looking to do, as I prefaced, the point was to bring up existing members. And to Kevin's point, and you reiterated, they had discussions on this, and I'm satisfied with his answers, in addition to listening to my concerns. So That's fine. Thank you. The other thing brings us to the current financial statements. And John, don't take this the wrong way, but I don't understand anything on the statement as to what it means. I know you gave a narrative as to the cost of the Kelly services, the police department, and something else. And that's hard to see the statements. But when I look at the statement, I see a variance of $3 million, and I see everything else zeroed out. And if in one of my comments to you was the definition of an encumbrance. But so what? Can you tell me what this particular statement is supposed to mean? And again, don't take it as a derogatory, because I'm accustomed to looking at statements that have variances on it, and then looking at variances that are up or down, explaining the variance. This shows no variance except for 2 items, which to me concludes that you estimate, I mean, forget what it concludes, but it doesn't have any significance to me. And if you can enlighten me, I'd appreciate it.
If it's okay, I'd like to have Mr. Weaver walk us through the report. Before he does though, Rich, what I'd like to point out is probably 2 years ago now, the then Finance Committee asked that any minus figures be taken care of on a monthly basis. So we started to take care of those each month, and that's why you don't see any variances now.
When you say take care of, what do you mean?
Well, let's say a number were showing slightly negative, and another one were positive. They would want us to transfer from the positive budget line to cover the negative budget line on a monthly basis. There's 2 views of that.
That's a stupid statement for them to have recommended to you.
Well,
I mean, it makes this report absolutely meaningless. Absolutely meaningless. It makes it. I don't know what $3 million at the end of the year shows. I mean, normally I look at that number as an indication as to whether the pot of money we have is going to be positive or negative.
Right.
And again, these board members, at least I was told that I was financially responsible for a deficit in the spending, if the city doesn't bail us out. So, to have me write a check for $300,000 to cover my share of a negative balance, it hurt my checkbook substantially.
But I think we're willing to, whatever the committee's preference is, we can do it either way.
But I assume that you were told that, because I don't think any professional would make any heads or tails out of this particular statement. I mean, I couldn't read out of it. It couldn't make any sense. I can go through and give you an analogy of a couple of things, but since you've agreed to go back and have the variances, I think those variances are important, because if it shows a negative variance, then we have a problem, and we can explain what's creating that. Now, in the mechanics of the mathematics, if you got a negative variance and you got positive variances and they offset, you'd sit back and sigh and say, okay, the pluses and minuses agree. But that net of pluses and minuses, or as we get closer to the year end, make us aware in what our financial position is. It also gives us the opportunity to look at line numbers and categories, or line numbers rather, as to what expenses are going out of whack relative to the budget assumptions that you have. So
Is everyone else frozen?
I don't have to explain it to you, you're a financial person, but my suggestion is going to be to go back, have the variances show, and then we deal with the explanations to the variances.
Okay, understood. We can do that.
And you could take, then you could take the rest of the meeting to go through the report.
Mike, do you want to walk through the highlights?
Sure. And yes, we're happy to change the report, however best suits the board. But this is the first of several documents in the presentation, and this is just a high-level summary. One, just showing what the overall variance of the general budget is, and then additionally, we'll take this time to call out any significant items that we think are of note. So you'll see here through December 31st, which is the end of the calendar year, we had spent $56.3 million and of the $150 million budget. And in addition to that, 90.6 was encumbered, leaving us with the balance that you noted of 3.1. It's also noted below in that boxed out column. I'm not sure, Mr. Gianelli, I think the original question came from you about encumbrance. So for the benefit of everyone here, the way I like to think of an encumbrance is money that's earmarked, if you will, to be spent. So if you can think of it that way. There are three things we wanted to call out this month. One is the post-pandemic labor struggles, as many people are seeing, not just in Danbury or in education, but around the world in many different sectors. It is increasingly difficult to find staffing, as well as there appears to be rate differentials all over, and we're very familiar with that. That's the case here. So the first thing we called out is just the number of teacher absences and paraprofessionals have increased, in addition to the rate per day or per hour. The next
Mike,
item, which is the third paragraph.
Mike, let me ask you a question based on the narrative. So regarding the increase in the costs on the daily rate and stuff like that, which you feel is important, significant enough to highlight, where, for looking through the details, would I see such an indication? The reader should be able to follow the narrative to the report.
Right, and I think to a portion of your point before that, when the variances are all zeroed out, it could be difficult. Typically, when I see issues in labor, for us, you usually will see if you're under a staff, you'll see a positive variance in labor and benefits, and that's often countered by a negative variance in like a temp fee or agency fees, which for us is Kelly.
Yeah, all I was saying is, based on what you're showing me as a narrative, as I, as a reader, couldn't identify anything that you're talking about as a high point, or as my friend likes to call it, a needle mover for the month. I don't see any evidence. I can't see any evidence of that in this report. That's all. So
Understood.
But that's fine. And you can go through the rest of the report, but other than telling me how much you spent for the period of 5 months, I'm not really interested in that, because without other data, it has no significance to me. Maybe the other committee members do, but that's my opinion.
Okay.
Mr. Gianelli, Juanita has a question.
Juanita, go ahead.
Okay. One of the things that I'd like to, unless you tell me that it's of utmost significance, in the paragraph that you talk about the absences, and you're zeroing in on teachers and paraprofessionals, and I'm wondering if people who hold our administrative positions are included in those numbers.
Our salaries do roll up all into the same line, but specifically the large majority of openings is are in teachers and paraprofessionals.
I understand, but it says not only the number of absences for teachers and paraprofessionals, and I understand your, the next sentence talks about subs, and you may not get subs for your administrators, but certainly since that is a key point that keeps coming up in reports, I would appreciate that either you use the term professional educators, professional staff members, because it appears as if the arrow is always pointed at the teachers.
Noted.
John and Michael, let me make a suggestion for thought for you. It might be beneficial that in your detail of the lines, that you resume putting the account codes in. And I say that only because in a narrative, if you're talking about a specific category, you can bracket that and just refer to the line number. So again, for the ease of the reader to know what you're looking for rather than to have to scan down, 6 pages of a document.
That's a good suggestion. We can do that.
And then at some point between us, I'd like to get together with you, and this might be nitpicking with the other people, but I'd like to go through the definition of encumbrances.
Sure.
And again, to the rest of the people, this is stuff that to me, because this is my background and John could relate to it, it's important that at least we're on the same page as to how things are calculated. And it makes your life easier at the end of the day to read this stuff. But
Would you like me to write something up that's succinct and brief, or do you want to talk about it now, or what's your preference?
No, I mean, basically you gave some description in your response to me, but I have different examples that I'd like to go through with you. So, we'll do that offline.
Okay.
That's really getting into the weeds, and we don't have to, take anybody else's time with that stuff. All right, go ahead.
The second item we wanted to call out was the new union contract for the police officers. We contract with Danbury Police Department to have staff inside the school, as well as uniformed officers on a kind of an extra duty basis outside of the school. The new contract, John, I think you're a little bit more familiar with this, but that they are now going to be compensated at a higher daily rate. So that is going to be an incremental expense for us.
Yeah, correct. It's a 4-hour minimum for the extra duty. And I think we were under budgeted to start with. We were budgeting $50,000 for the 3 officers to be outside at arrival and dismissal. And we think that could be slightly more than 100,000 this year. So it's a line that's in trouble, and that's why we want to bring it to your attention. The new contract.
John and Mike, for our next report, could you have some numbers to support that paragraph? I think it will help the committee and
Certainly.
board associated.
Thank you, Kevin. That was going to be my next. It'd be good to, since you had the numbers, I mean, can estimate it with the contracts. It'd be interesting to know, so you know what the magnitude of these dollars are you talking. So I agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And just the last thing to call out was the city's annual financial audit. The financial audit for the statements ending June 30th, 2022 is still in progress. John and I had a meeting with the city as well as our auditors again today, and we've been meeting on a weekly basis just to continue to move that ball forward.
We were told at a council meeting at the same time that they authorized $100,000 to be, that is, the council authorized $100,000 to be provided so that they could hire consultants, accountants to come in to complete this project. And Dan Garrick, I think his name is, the finance director for the city, said and almost guaranteed that this report plus a good part of 23 would be done by Thanksgiving. And assuming he was talking about the Thanksgiving that passed and not the one that's up and coming. So, I mean, this is the biggest joke that I've heard in 2 years. The entire last year was finger pointing as to the Board of Ed problem, the city problem, and it's still not resolved, which is unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable.
Amen.
And maybe we just needed more people to be able to speak up and talk about this. I don't know what happened to the $100,000, whether that money was actually spent or they're still complaining they can't find accountants. I mean, there are plenty of people out there with financial ability to go in and do audit work. You don't have to be a genius to do schedules and to do reconciliations and stuff like that.
Of the
Mr.
100,000,
Mr. J, you have two questions, one from Teresa and I think also from Mr. Hawley.
Teresa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with you 100%. This audit business, we were promised November. This is ridiculous. And I'm making my voice known to the council as well. This is terrible.
So I'm glad you're irritated. Richard?
Richard, from past experience, you know me that I look to concentrate within what I refer to as needle movers. Things that have a significant impact on the $150 million operation budget.
We haven't got there yet.
I understand, but we're moving toward that. So
Yep.
to your point, where you're looking for, clarification in regard to the variances, right? If it would be possible for Michael and John to possibly keep it simple. What are our top 10 expenses against that 150? And where do we stand against them on a year to date, as well as an encumbrance line?
Yeah.
Because honestly, those 10 major expenses probably, and again, John, Michael, perhaps you can correct me if I'm wrong, but are probably 92, possibly 93% of the total operating budget. So it doesn't leave a whole lot. It doesn't leave a whole lot of play. I mean, we've got to look to concentrate on those. And again, in my opinion, those needle movers. That $100,000 for school resource, or for that matter, police department, is a drop in the bucket when you're looking at a 24-25 budget of 178 million.
And
why are we spending so much time on it?
Yeah, and also, John, to that point, I was going to continue before Rich asked it. Is there anything that you could add to the current financial statement based on your knowledge of the numbers that you feel are items, hot button items, to put it that way, that you earmarked or as a watch item, and also to Richard's point, that are, to use his terminology, needle points? Is there anything currently that you could make us aware that you feel, based on your experience, are some costs that you're concerned about?
So, Mr. Ginelli, John, Mike, I have on this screen to Rich's point about the big needle movers, and here what you're looking at are our categories in our general budget. And I don't know, John, I'm just wondering if everyone would be, they benefit from just kind of hearing the thought process around, number one, this is everything that's unencumbered, and this is the anticipated balance to date. Salaries and benefits, of course, are our biggest needle movers in the district. Maybe you can start with those two. And then if there's some questions about anything else, maybe we can talk about those as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. That's a good chart. And yes, Rich, there is something we'd like to bring up. From the chart you're seeing here, we're not unlike any other public school district. Most of our expense is in staffing, staffing and benefits, usually 3/4 or more, and we're no exception. So that's where you find the action. Um, what's new this month, in addition, is that we've been really scrutinizing our grants, and Mike will get to that in a minute. But what we we're able to find, we believe, is some room in the grants uh, to move some budgeted items, some actual expenses out of the budget and into the grants and still meet the guidelines of the grants. And as a result, if you remember a month ago, you weren't seeing a balance like this, but the $3 million unencumbered is very close now to what the ask, if I could call it that, in front of the ad hoc. And we'd like to maybe change that a little bit. I'll explain in a second. But there were two grants in particular that we found unfilled positions or extra budgeted and approved by the state for salaries that were not needed. We had hoped to fill all our positions in September and October, but as Mike mentioned, the labor market is stubborn. So the first grant is the ESSER 3 that you keep hearing about, the one we're trying to move into the budget for next year. We felt there was it a few $100,000 there, Mike, 600,000 or 700,000, that if we didn't do anything, if we didn't fill the positions, nothing else changed, that money would have gone back to the state of Connecticut. So we've taken some expenses out of the school budget and reclassified them as grant expenditures. We did the same thing with our Title I grants. We have several, call them the title grants. There's Title I, there's Title II, there's some non-public portions. There's some grant balances that were carried over from the previous year. That's pretty common. Districts that don't spend their whole grant can carry it over for another 12 months. But we found some capacity there. So between those two moves, we think we have an unencumbered balance that quite possibly could hold until June. Now it's early. I think we're almost at the halfway mark in terms of 180 school days. So a lot could change. If we learned anything last year, it was that things changed quickly. But the idea we'd like to raise with the ask is perhaps having the city condition that, or in other words, make it subject to release. That if we are to run into any unexpected situations, or if we're successful filling some of these necessary positions, that they would release a portion of the $3 million as needed. Now, what that would mean is going back to them on when things occur, explaining, supporting, and things like that, perhaps through the finance director, maybe not the full council, but I'll take a chance that maybe we can eke our way till June 30th without all of that money. So, and back to the original point, that all comes from our two big accounts, salaries, and there's some benefits that go with it. So that's something new this month.
So John, let me see if I understand.
Mm.
You're saying that best case scenario, that with the adjustments that you've outlined, it may be, best case may be that at the end of the year, June of 24, we may be able to squeak by without having the need to dip in to the reserve.
Right.
And in the event, to whatever extent, we have to, that you would like to, on request, take down a portion of that this year to fill that void. Is that correct?
Right, there are some positions that are, I hate this, they're all important, but some are mission critical. For example, we could desperately use another Spanish teacher at the elementary level. And if we're successful, that could be something we'd like the money released for. Things like that. I don't expect there to be a lot like that, but it does cover us in the event, or a sudden uptick in health insurance like we saw last year.
Right.
Mi-
Okay.
Mr. J, that is correct, exactly what you said. That's absolutely correct. That's what John's saying.
So in summary, the deficit of $4.7 million, previously 1.7 was basically resolved due to however you
Internal
made that
cuts.
resolution.
Budget
That's right.
cuts, right,
Right.
cuts.
And the additional $3 million through additional maneuvers may make us whole. Let me
Yep.
go one step further. I'm confused on the issue. Now, I don't want to complicate it because there's another 200,000 and 400,000 that enter into, you mentioned the ad hoc. I don't want
Right.
to confuse it with that. But in the presentation of the budget that we received on January 31st, I forget the page number, but there was a slide in there which made reference to a reserve of $5 million. What, I mean, I'm getting confused as to the magnitude and the amount of reserves. Is it 3 or 5 in terms of what we're looking for?
Well, one of the questions you asked, and I don't know if Ken Wallace could put it up, the second set of materials called the answers to the budget questions. If you could, if you look at the second page, I think it makes it pretty clear. There are three requests in front of the ad hoc committees. There are actually three committees. One is it's the other report, Ken, the one that's like this. It went around late this afternoon. There's a request for $3 million for the operating budget for the unrealized savings. And that's the one we're now going to talk about having it conditioned or subject to release.
Right.
There are two other smaller ones. One relates to the July cyber breach and the expenses we incurred, mostly for the deductible in our insurance policy. We have there it is. If you just go to the second page, Ken, that if you could just zoom right in on the middle of that, there are the three different requests. I was just talking about the middle one. We had a $100,000 deductible for the loss, and then there was about another $102,000 of improvements, security things that we absolutely had to do to keep our system safe and to be able to reopen. We would like that money. We needed our technology budget, just didn't have a lot of extra capacity to do that kind of thing. So that we would need. And then at the top there is, the special ed laws changed in late June, long after our budget was done. Now requiring service to disabled students up to their 22nd birthday. We have some students like that that we didn't expect to provide service to, and we think that'll be $400,000. So we feel a change in the law, a mandate after the budgets were all said and done, might be a reason for an interim appropriation. But it's that third one there that we now, it's almost February. I don't think the labor market's going to improve right away. So we're feeling a little more comfortable, unfortunately, saying those positions probably will remain open to the end of the year.
But John, you still haven't answered the question.
I'm sorry.
Is it 3.6 million versus 5 million,
Oh,
or is it
okay.
3 million versus 5? Is,
Well, yeah, I'm
in the
sorry.
budget presentation, it was noted $5 million.
Right,
So-
so John, let me start on this. And Ken, please leave this up here, and thank you for finding this and putting this up for us. The request that's up here to 3.6 is the request that is still remains from last school year. And then we made an additional request because of the cyber attack and the change to the special education law. So the board, prior to the end of last school year, on behalf of the board, we submitted a request of $3,044,797. And then with that gap, our request was to tap the reserves for that amount. And then we made an additional request after the cyber attack and the special education law implementation of 602,274 additional. That brought us up to the 3.6. Given the, I'm not really sure whether to call it a delay, however you want to call it, but it was made clear that no decision would be made on this request until after the election. And then, of course, once November came, there was really no action or activity or any movement toward meeting until January. We, as a district, could not continue to plan as if we were definitely getting the $3.6 million. So since then, we have made moves internally to further reduce and slow down spending so that we did not drive the district into a deficit. And so anticipating that we can come very close to ending the school year in the black, we are planning to now, instead of in the event we don't, again, we are planning as if we are not getting those monies. And so with $5.8 million in reserves, our request is as a strategy for the following year, use 5 million of the 5.8 millions toward the 28.9. That's a part of the entire ask of the district.
Okay, all right. So so your theory, put it that way. I can't think of the
Plan.
word. Right. Was to use that as a source of revenue to cut down on the $28 million ask.
Yes.
Oh, okay, all right, so I got you, all right. Again, it was confusing in terms of the methodologies as
Yes,
to what
I understand.
created the linear. So thank you
Yeah.
very much.
And for that reason, Mr. Ginelli, we took it out of the slide. So, to help avoid that confusion.
Yeah, no, but
How the city addresses the $28.9 million ask is really up to the city, obviously.
right.
And we know we have $5.8 million in the bank, if you will.
Sure, okay, thank you for the answer. It
thank
clears
you.
things up. It's the efficiency.
Teresa has her hand up.
Yep, I'm sorry, Teresa, go ahead.
Mr. J, there's a on your screen. Ken, can you stop sharing for a minute? Mr. J, on your screen over in the top right-hand corner, it says view and it looks like a waffle.
Yeah,
If you press that, everyone on your screen should come up if you press gallery. And then you'll be able to see everyone on the screen. So top right-hand corner, it says view.
yeah, I looked for the balance of time. Every time I use this machine, I get disconnected. So it's okay.
All right, we can do it another time.
Yeah, if Gladys doesn't mind being a mediator,
Okay.
that's great. Thank you.
Right.
Go ahead, Teresa. Thanks, Kevin.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One question on those SPED figures. One, how many students does that 400,000 cover? And do we ever get a firm estimate? I mean, these seems to be estimates as opposed to actual costs for these students. At this point in time, I mean, we've been thrown this figure out for a while,
Mhm.
and we still don't know. It's still an estimate.
My last conversation with Kelly Trutchess, our special ed director, it was less than 5 students, and the components of the 400,000 include out-of-district transportation for 2 of them. at a cost of $70,000 each. Now, one of the reasons it's still estimates is, we're almost at the halfway mark. We still have another half a year to go. There could be days when those students don't go to school and we don't have to pay, or something changes like that. So that's ongoing. And then, as I understand it, there's also a student who's in district who requires additional supports. And there's a allocation of the in-district supports for that student also. So it's a handful, not many, and
And
that-
John,
that's
you
what
said,
makes up
you said roughly $70,000 for transportation, but I'm
for
assuming,
two,
I'm assuming tuition is extended as well for the out-of-district placement.
240,000
Okay.
for everything else. And then some supplies, I think, are in there. Uh, Ken, I think to Richard's point, that's the highlight of, we want to stay on the kind of the macro things. That would be our message.
Great. One other question. When you look at the budget as you prepared, if you can go back and show that screen, just the very first screen you have where you have the budget and the encumbrance and all that stuff, the summary.
From the report.
I'll get
Yeah.
it. I'll find it.
Here
This
it
one?
is.
Right,
This
right
one,
there.
John?
Yep, exactly.
Mhm.
The adjusted budget, okay, it's now 150. However, previously, and this may be because of something I wrote to you, previously, the numbers, the gross would be, let's say 153, and there was a negative number of $3 million, I don't know what you call it, unadjusted, that unassigned, to bring it down to the 150. If this, to me, if it's adjusted back to what reality is, makes more sense, because as we get to the expenditure and the encumbrance, we'd be able to see if this, if the variances holds
Yeah.
true. So,
Exactly. And the other way to, think, look at it, this is what you're saying is, we can't spend the 153 until we have it.
Right.
Until someone says, yes, this is what we have, and it's what we have to live within.
so yeah, I just wanted to point that out, that it
Yeah,
was a
good
difference
point.
in a presentation of this, of these
Yep.
numbers.
Exactly.
So I thank you for considering that adjustment. Okay, so that basically, I hope the next meeting, we'd be able to get into more of the details and the
Yep.
needle movers, as Richard calls them, so that we can have a pretty good understanding and handle on where we are. But,
Right.
again, yep, I don't know what planet these other people were on who told you to do that, but it was something else.
Richard, if I may, John, could you, so the other purchase services of 20.8 million, that is is that transportation?
It's mostly transportation. Yes, that's more than $10 million. I think that's just, well, that's regular ed and special ed, close to 11 million. The other big item in there is our out-of-district special ed tuitions. I think that's $4 million, if I'm not mistaken, this year. So those two things alone are 14 million.
Yeah.
Okay. So if possible, rather than grouping it like that, would there be an opportunity to just show the top 10 expenditures?
Yeah, I
And the
like
variance?
that idea. Yes. And I think once we, say it this way, take the transfers away and look at the line items, what's up and what's down, I think it'd be easy to pull out the top 10. That'd be very interesting to do. but you'll see those. So on the next page, we only have 112 line items. That's not a lot for a district our size. So you'll see those big items right there. They jump right out, so.
Yeah. But So,
Juanita has her hand up, Mr. Janelli.
Go ahead, Juanita.
Hi, a question for Superintendent Kevin. On your slide, I don't know, as you move ahead, did you have something, a slide on school spending requests by schools?
You mean on the presentation itself?
The one you, yes, the presentation that you're showing now? Did that?
Right, so this is part of our monthly financial report.
Okay.
The
So-
presentation in terms of the budget captures program request. And so K-5, 6-8, and 9-12, and it's broken up that way
Okay.
in terms of new requests for next year.
For Rich Janelli, number 13, the question for your requests for John said, provide school spending requests by schools. And I didn't see that come forward. And
I don't think I requested that of him, so
Okay.
I saw the information, but the only reason is that I don't think, because as you and I had previous conversations, I look at that as putting the cart before the horse. But
that was for 23, 24. Anyway, we are coming up to our next 24, 25 school year. John, if I could please, or you can tell me where to go to find it, the per pupil based allocations
Yep.
for the 23, 24 school year. I see the one for the 24, 25. You provided that.
Yes,
And we did have a conversation, and I am still looking for the school spending requests by school.
could I just ask for some clarification? We can do this for sure. I just want to get it right. In the answers to the budget questions, Mr. Janelli's number, or the number 13, that did come from a board member, not Mr. Janelli. We summarized what the schools had given just so we could get you something right away. But right below that, we showed the school, and we call them base allocations, they're per pupil. For example, Great Plain for 236 students at $49 a student got 11,564. Hayes Town, double the size, same
Correct.
amount per pupil. Are you looking for those new totals? Or are you looking for what the principal has decided to do with the monies that they've been allocated?
Two things. For the per pupil base allocations,
Yep.
You've supplied that for 24, 25.
Yes,
I am looking for the prior year to see if there was a reduction
okay,
in that. And
Yep.
As far as the spending requests, I believe each school submits a budget
yes,
and
online,
their list,
Yep.
whatever. So I did not want to see them combined. I was looking to see individual schools.
okay. If I could just answer the question, we can we can give you exactly that information. But the per pupil amount, which is how we equalize things, we have one per pupil amount for elementary, one for middle, one for secondary. We did not increase that amount this year as an austerity measure. We knew it was going to be a difficult budget year. So rather than increase that, say, by inflation, that $49 per pupil at the elementary, that was the same last year. But what changed was their projected enrollment. So if thought they were getting 400 kids last year, and next year we're projecting 410, they would have gotten $49 more for the extra kids, but the amount per kid stayed the same.
And can you help me understand where the cost per pupil amount comes from?
Well, it was really to run the school, the different
is
things
it-
that happened, primarily to spend in the classrooms for teachers who might need
Yeah.
supplies, or if you get a new teacher or something like that, or
Who determines that amount? Who determines the 49, the 5775, the 85, the 6650?
that was my recommendation. Of course, I ran that through the cabinet. So I'd like to think it's a joint decision before we released it. That's where it came from.
Okay, and so on the next page, John, still looking at the allocations.
Yes,
I'm not sure how you determine the cost per pupil. And I understand you said you're running it, by the cabinet. But it appears as if we're basing it on equality rather than equity. So that's one concern we can talk about later. And then we have our alternative schools.
right.
And I'm not sure that basing the allocation on numbers gives enough money to do what they do.
Right. So in July, this past July, these per pupil amounts were reduced by 30% from what we had originally adopted and voted on as a budget cutting strategy. Part of that $1.6 million you saw that we cut to lower the request from the ask from the city. We thought we had to tighten our own belts first before we asked the city for any extra money. One of the moves we made was reduced everybody's discretionary or departmental monies by 30%. Now, then we went to build the new budget, kept those levels low where they were, just in order to hold the budget down for next year.
And so, just an opinion. So, at the expense of our students, we chose to reduce by 30% what was allocated per building. And so,
Yes,
going forward, perhaps we need to be looking at reducing positions and not staff, because we certainly, the paper says that we have 100 positions that are open that we were unable to fill this year.
duly noted.
Thank you.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you. So, John, I want to thank you also. To recap, my intent is to have financial statements so that when you come up with the narrative highlighting your concerns of costs, that the details would be supportive, and also breaking out the big categories that are lumped together with multi-items in there would be a lot easier to comprehend. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And to the rest of the people, I do urge you to read John's comments to me. That information is to me important. It adds to your understanding as to what you're looking at, and basically how you evaluate the numbers. So the next thing on the agenda I saw was a presentation. I'm not sure, Kevin, whether was your intent to go through the presentation again, since we're going to do that tomorrow?
No, Mr. Janelli, I just wanted to make the board aware that we've used this extra time, meaning instead of last Wednesday to this Wednesday. In the board packet, the board received the additional recommendations as Rich Hawley had recommended. And so the things that I talked about in terms of aids in kindergarten classrooms, additional supports for classrooms across the schools, particularly bilingual support. Those requests were folded in to the presentation in a way where it's folded into our bottom line number. And so I think last week we had presented it where it was kind of an additional page. And so I just wanted to bring to the board's attention, to the committee's attention, that the updated presentation, and I'll just put it on the screen quickly so you have an idea of what I'm talking about. And
It was nicely done where you broke it out into slides.
thank you.
Yeah.
And trying to do this in a way where it's accessible for our
Yeah.
families, for our staff, and everyone.
You know, I'm a pain in the neck. I had to go through and check off each one to make sure that the slides calculated.
That's what we need. That's what needs to be done. So I'm just gonna share, we did add a couple of pages regarding, and this was a slide that we had talked about last year in the meeting with the previous board. And it's really about a return, it's really a return on investment slide. So this is something that's new in the presentation, next generation accountability. Some of our previous board members might recall this is essentially our report card. And our next generation accountability index, you'll see our score is a 67. You'll see some of the other districts who had higher scores like Norwalk at a 69. East Hartford also at a 67. This includes growth for students, our overall scores for graduation, scores on our SAT. It's a little bit of everything that helps to compile this accountability index score. And so
Kevin,
you'll
can I
see our,
interrupt?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
If it's possible, I remember the first year I left the board, you had put this in, I had asked you to put this in.
Yes.
I was
that's
trying to
correct.
find that copy. My feeling is it was a lesser cost per student
That's right.
and a lesser evaluation number. In theory, if that's the case, it does show, but not necessarily a fact, that additional spending could lead, and particularly in Danbury, could lead to better results. And in this case here, shows that the return on investment, your money is invested very wisely and prudently relative to what we're doing to, I don't want
No.
to say competition, but Durham districts.
Right. No doubt about it, Mr. Janelli. And you know, the point of this slide, and I'll just walk the board through in the committee through a couple of additional slides that we've added, is we feel strongly that we've been responsible stewards of the board and the city's monies. However, there cannot continue to be an expectation that my staff can, on the backs of teachers and admin, can continue to move and have these kind of results with a population of students who require more support. And if we're talking about reducing, we can't expect that we will continue to have even this level of outcomes for students if the needs are greater and we are about to reduce more. And so just for some clarity for everyone who's watching right now, we spend, and you'll see along with Meriden, lower per student than quite frankly anyone in the state of Connecticut. And despite those numbers, you will see $21,000 for Stanford. They're at a 65 on the index. And then the green is Stanford, and they are at 65 on the index. West Haven is spending a little over $17,000 per student at a 66. So they're certainly closer to us, but again, they're not spending nearly as much. We're not spending nearly as much as them. And so that's the point of this slide. I wanted to bring the board's attention to just a couple of more slides. We also put our DERGs in. And so this is kind of the comparable districts in our demographic reference group. We do have a definition of the demographic reference group that you'd not see in the other presentation. So we thought it was important that the board had this multi-language learner enrollment growth, us compared to our other districts as well. This is a count since 2017 to 2023. That's what the growth has looked like, us against other districts across our DERG. This is the general operating budget for Danbury, for Norwalk, and Stanford. And I know oftentimes, you know, our community, even some members on our board, frown at the comparisons with Norwalk and Stanford. But our socioeconomic profile, these two districts are the closest to us than any districts in the state of Connecticut. Norwalk is at a $226 million general operating budget. Stanford is at a 313 general operating budget. So I just need the board to understand and be mindful, our families to understand and be mindful, the city of Danbury to understand and be mindful. This is what it should be a heck of a lot closer to these numbers in terms of a general operating budget, and then our grants should be the supplemental and the supplemental positions to help support the general operating budget. So you'll also see that slide. And then we added in some additional information regarding our grants. And so these are the big major ones at the top. And then a little idea about ideally what these things should be spent on. So we did the lines IDEA, Title 1, 2, 3, 4, state bilingual, and you can see the awards coming from the state, the federal and state grants. And then behind that, we tried to provide a pie graph as well. And you'll kind of see a breakdown here of all of the grants, and then you'll see a breakdown by category. So this is including all of them, $41 million in salaries, $3 million. I'm sorry, salaries and benefits, $41 million, staff development, 3, et cetera. And then you'll kind of see a kind of a rollout of grants and general fund. I know this is something the previous board in this board has been some questions about that. Obviously, if there are some additional questions, we can provide even more information at subsequent meetings. But I just wanted to make sure the committee and the board just aware of the updates that were made, because with the additional time, we just thought it would be appropriate that we add this now and not wait another meeting.
Kevin, can I ask you to go back to probably the second slide when you get the enrollment, the one for the multi-language and the special ed?
Absolutely.
Right. No, this is not is this the one I was looking at?
And so this one, I'll explain it quickly. Our multi-language learners, the enrollment growth since 2017.
I'm not looking at the growth. Go back to the very beginning.
Sure. Per pupil spending. This is the return on investment.
It's right after your.
Oh, okay.
It's right after enrollment.
Okay.
It's the second slide.
Operating budgets.
Nope. Okay, maybe it's a different presentation. You have a slide that says enrollment that shows that.
Oh, okay. It might be in the beginning of this one.
Yeah, it's the one after that.
Oh, this one, yes.
Okay. Consider and think about this. If you do a pie chart and take the combination of the multi-language learners and you add to that the special ed, and you do a pie chart to the total population, I think it'll come out close to 51 or 52%. I think that's a dramatic statement to be made as to what this district and possibly the average classroom is made up
Looks
of.
like, okay.
To understand what a teacher is up against in turning to teach your class. And it also supports your need for funding in these particular areas because they require more resources.
Okay. We can definitely do that. I like that. I think that would be a good slide. Because it's essentially putting this one in one slide. Right? This is regular ed. This is multi-language. Well, this is everyone, multi-language and special ed, but we would make a pie graph that includes everyone. We can definitely do that.
Yeah, just take the projected numbers, add them together as a total of the 12,000, whatever it is.
Okay.
And to demonstrate the total. And then as the email I wrote to you, I find that missing in the current version we have. The missing gaps is where you account for 18 million of the 28 of the new ads. So it's not clear to me as to what all of the increases are. And then we need to build up to what the 178 is, similar to what you had in the presentations of January 31st. It just completes the picture It's like just a void the way it came across this way without having that information.
Okay, okay.
Teresa has her hand up.
Yep. Hi, Terry. Teresa?
Thank you. I'm one of those previous finance committee members questioning the comparison to Norwalk and Stanford. I do want to point out they have larger populations. What would be more beneficial is the proportion of the education budget to the rest of their
City.
overall city budget.
Mhm.
We certainly have a smaller population as a whole as taxpayers. And then Norwalk is what? And Stanford, they're way over 100,000 people. So I disagree with that comparison. Thank you.
Okay. And is my last, I'm assuming, Kevin, we're finished with the presentation
Yes, yes.
aspect. My last comment is, I would like the committee members to think and to provide and come up with a list of particular reports that we would submit to the administration that we'd like to see. I can give you an example, is an idea of reports on the enterprise funds, or maybe Kelly Services. Also, to have a calendar associated with that in terms of when we think we could expect them, in addition to reports that the administration wants to give us and a calendar of dates, so that we're working together and we know what we're going to be looking at relative to certain meetings coming up. It's not to inundate you with work. We'll go down and see which reports are meaningful reports, but it's just something that there's other information out there that might be good to be looked at year after year, if not little, and it doesn't fall through the cracks based on who's in office at that particular time. So, all right, that for me concludes, my comments relative to this meeting. I hope it's been productive. Does anybody else have any comments?
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, staff, executive board. Appreciate your efforts.
Yep. Okay. Then, Mrs. Cooper, I don't know, does the chair ask for a motion or do you?
Make a motion to close the finance committee meeting.
I make
Second that.
All in favor? Oh, sorry.
Aye. Okay.